Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. Tonight is Thursday, February 14th, 2013, V-Day. And I'm your host, Aaron Dykes. Now, tonight in the news, we have, of course, the aftermath of the Christopher Dorner episode. It ended in spectacular abandon for due process, spectacular incitement of divisions in our society, with many people cheering on the factions warring against the LAPD, while others cheering on the extrajudicial killing of Christopher Dorner. Of course, Breitbart and Drudge Report exposed how many of the CNN panel hosts cheered it and celebrated, said it was exciting like a Denzel Washington movie, and compared Dorner to Django Unchained going on a killing spree. Meanwhile, Melissa Melton wrote yesterday about the 3 wallets with ID cards that were reportedly recovered, all belonging to Christopher Dorner, which raised their own questions. One of them was allegedly found, of course, at the Big Bear cabin, apparently not scorched by the fires set by police and sheriffs there. Yet 2 other IDs were found in southern parts of California, one by a stadium in San Diego and another at the border crossing point. And so which wallet is the real one? Are any of them real? Do the media have any grasp on the facts? And do these raise further questions the way the passports allegedly recovered from the 9/11 hijackers do about the veracity of 9/11? And of course, you got the police wantonly firing upon innocent civilians, endangering their lives, recklessly pursuing this one man they couldn't catch for days, nearly a week. But of course, the biggest questions of all over Christopher Dorner are raised over the ludicrous claims that the cabin fire was not intentionally set. Paul Joseph Watson writes about the denial on behalf of the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office, specifically stating that it was not set on purpose, saying we didn't intentionally burn that cabin to get Mr. Dorner out. And they just went on to deny it and defer questions from the press and duck other questions about whether they offered him a chance to surrender or what name you, despite the fact that audio was broadcast live on many of these local stations, exist in the police recordings, talking about burn that MFer down, talking about the CS gas they were throwing in there, talking about how the burners are deployed. We have the fire ready. Now, we have clips summing up some of this audio and, of course, the ridiculous denial. Can we go to that? Do we have that ready, guys?
We do believe this gun battle is going on with Christopher Dorner. He is armed and extremely dangerous.
How sure are they that this is Dorner?
Well, we're not positive, and until we get this guy in custody, until he's in handcuffs and in a jail, we're not going to know for sure.
We believe suspect Dorner began firing and ambushed our deputy sheriffs that were responding. 2 of our deputy sheriffs were struck by gunfire.
Certainly it could be anywhere at this point, and that's why we're searching door to door.
We spoke to individuals in that neighborhood who said that no one ever knocked on that door, on their doors, people who live there.
As I said, there was an extensive search in that area.
Burn the gas, burn the gas, burn the gas. Hey, hold it, get out, get the F out. Is anyone founded if they think that this was an intentional burning alive of the suspect?
I don't know, really how to respond to the recording.
They have not been able to determine who started the fire inside the cabin, whether it was the suspect, presumably Dorner, or if it was perhaps one of the things that the SWAT team out there had planned in advance of this.
I can tell you that it was not on purpose. We did not intentionally burn down that cabin.
10-4, we're just bringing fire in about 200 yards out. Your call. Charlie, you ready for fire? 61 Charlie, 61 with the map. Negative.
We used the next tier gas was that was pyrotechnic. Does generate a lot of heat. We introduced those canisters into the residence.
There was some chatter that was caught, I guess, on scanners and everything about a burner, and I don't know what that is. Can you explain what a burner is?
The pyrotechnic type canisters are commonly referred to as burners.
7 burners deployed and we have a fire.
Copy, 7 burners deployed and we have a fire.
Get going right now.
And so there you have it, the government, aspects of the government, and again engaged in a Waco-style burning down of a suspect, demonizing him in the press, burning and killing him. We'll never know if he was really guilty of all these crimes because, of course, there won't be a real investigation. It's just this public trial. But then the denial, oh, that was semantics. Burner, that didn't mean fire. Saying burn it down, that didn't mean burn it down. Fire, that just means they were excited. Gas, that's some kind of antiquated 60s term. It's a gas, baby. That was just the way SWAT people talk on the scene. It doesn't mean they meant to start a fire, even though they started a fire and then it burned him down and allegedly killed him. Of course, you saw also in that clip the former FBI assistant director, Tom Fuentes. He was asked to explain why they were talking about burning it down if, in fact, they didn't mean to burn it down. He was at a loss to explain and said, well, there's a lot of questions to answer, and he wouldn't expect these professional SWAT people to talk that way, and then quickly shuffle on to how those conversations should have been on encrypted radio frequencies so the public couldn't hear them and raise questions about why things were burned down. Again, they burned him down on purpose because they do that over and over again, partially to sell you the message that the government's in charge and don't try to go against them. Of course, the things Dorner's accused of doing were horrible, and he was very much a villain despite the portrayals of him as a hero because he has a manifesto and because the LAPD are, in fact, corrupt. Well, if the police would stop protecting police who do bad things, individuals, and protecting them through their police unions and making sure they never see justice, the public wouldn't be turned against the police. They could celebrate the police who are law-abiding, upholding of public safety, and they could just simply punish the police who are doing the wrong things. But instead, they have to gang up and defend the bad police and make them all bad by association, and then the public gets angry at them and cheers on an anti-hero like Dorner. It's just insane. Let's not do that, folks. Let's just live by the law. Meanwhile, drones, Dorner and the NDA, Kurt Nemo sums up an article about how lobbyists for the drone industry from the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International said things might have been a lot different if we had more drones in the sky, if the FAA wasn't being burdened by these, quote, privacy concerns, saying, basically decrying the fact they've been delayed for months by people worried about drones and the violation of the Fourth Amendment. No, let's throw that all out. Let's throw the baby out with the bathwater because there might be a few individual sickos in society, so we need to not have due process so we can hunt them down. And again, that comes on the heels of Paul Joseph Watson's article. New surveillance system tracks every moving object in an entire city. They've got a state-of-the-art spy system housed in a drone that can hover at 20,000 feet and claims to be able to record every moving object in an entire city. That's a DARPA project, increasingly like Skynet, as they prepare for a total surveillance occupation of America. And, of course, they find that a majority of Americans support drone strikes in a new poll that, of course, refers to overseas strikes in Yemen or Pakistan. But you can see where they're setting the stage for weaponized drones to be used here in America on top of surveillance drones. So, again, they're using the Dorner event to hype up for more surveillance, more drones, while Missouri is calling for all-out gun confiscation. A new bill, House Bill 545, introduced by Democrats Rory Ellinger and Jill Shoup, would ban the possession, the sale, the transfer, the manufacture of semi-automatic rifles and high-capacity magazines, and would make the holders of them in Missouri Class C felons. If this bill becomes law, it would give Missourians 90 days to either oust their illegitimate government who's infringing on the Second Amendment, or to get rid of those weapons, or be prosecuted and jailed. It's very similar to the kind of legislation that was passed in New York State and introduced in California. These are the people like Governor Andrew Cuomo, who said the Second Amendment's a scourge on society. No, it's not an individual protection meant to hold back tyrannical government. That's a scourge on society. Disgusting stuff, but what do you expect from these people? An expert has told us that they will combat terrorism. Oh, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. With the guns, we have a special report. Dan Badandi is our Northeast correspondent. He interviewed Stuart Rhodes, attended a rally there in Rhode Island about how people there are rallying for their Second Amendment rights. Do we have that report ready?
This is Dan Badandi reporting for the Infowars Nightly News. We are in Providence, Rhode Island, at another pro-Second Amendment rally, one of many across the nation. You know, the government is after our Second Amendment. You got Dianne Feinstein hell-bent on taking our arms away completely, and what they're doing is slowly incrementing, like limited magazines to 10 rounds, and what kind of ammo you could buy now, and all of a sudden assault weapons they're going after. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's ridiculous. I think if they want us to give up our guns, they should do it first. They should stop putting drones in our skies. They should stop saying they have the ability to arrest us and put us in jail without trial or charge. They should stop listening to our phone calls without a warrant of the Patriot Act. And they should stop militarizing our police forces. And then if they did that, maybe I'd consider limiting guns, but I don't think so.
The long line of Americans who have died and bled for liberty stretches all the way back to Lexington Green and all the way forward to right now in the sands of Iraq and Afghanistan and here in America. If we let their sacrifice be in vain, our children will curse our names for giving away their birthright of liberty, desecrate the tombs of our fathers and our grandfathers, and we will also desecrate our own family honor for our children.
In our Constitution, we have an amendment that recognizes that the government must always trust the people, and the people must never trust the government. And that, believe it or not, is the Second Amendment. It doesn't mention guns, it doesn't mention knives, it doesn't mention swords, it doesn't mention weapons at all. It just says keep and bear arms, and it's all about trust.
And Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the famous Russian dissident, says that in the gulags they look back and they realize their mistake. He said, how we burned in the camps later, wondering what things would have been like if we had realized we had nothing to lose. And instead of paling in terror for the knock of a door in the middle of the night, we had set up an ambush down in the hall, using picks, pokers, axes, whatever was at hand. Despite Stalin's thirst, the machine would have ground to a halt without the willing tools and implements of oppression.
Well, you have a duty and responsibility to honor the Constitution and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that means you have a duty and responsibility to protect the Bill of Rights above and beyond. You know, as General Smedley Butler said, the famous Marine Corps general, the only thing we're fighting for is your homes and the Bill of Rights. And so now it's a Bill of Rights on the chopping block, and you have a duty to step up.
Now, as you can see, folks, we've got tons of people out here that are supporting the Second Amendment, braving the Northeast that we have here, and the government's about to call a state of emergency, so we got people here out supporting the Second Amendment. And thank you for watching. This is Dan Badandi for the Infowars Nightly News.
And thank you, Dan Badandi, for that report. So why are people talking about the Second Amendment? Well, we've talked about it so much in the past month and a half, 2 months, 3 months, you name it. But again, if you haven't seen the piece I did a few weeks ago, the founders intended us to have personal arms again and again and again. They have quotes showing us that in addition to the Second Amendment. But what is even that all about? Are we just arbitrarily holding ourselves to the words of some men from a couple hundred years ago? No, these are people who read history, who knew history, who are on the backs of the Enlightenment, who are playing off of why are there so many despotic princes and kings and priests and other arbitrary rulers ruling over our lives? Why does this keep happening? What can we do to limit the power of despots, to discourage tyrants, to discourage kings from running amok? What can we do to empower our own lives? That's what the Bill of Rights comes out of. That's why you see people in this video, Stuart Rhodes of Oath Keepers and others among them, talking about history, talking about the lessons we learned, talking about the things they don't want to repeat, because we know that history does repeat unless we learn from those mistakes and keep them from happening again. We should never give up on the Second Amendment. We should hold fast to that wisdom, build a better society off of it, but never should we give up those arms. We'll only get more Dorners and more corrupt LAPDs, more corrupt Obamas if we ever let go of those arms. We need to keep them to stave off oppression. That's the whole point. Now, turning to the population issue, we've seen these globalists, the Council on Foreign Relations, you name them, again and again use any excuse to sell their eugenics oppression agenda. It is the same agenda as the top-down New World Order control system, where they have degraded, debased, and dehumiliated not being a good choice of word. They have deprivated humankind. They have lessened, they have cheapened life, and they will use any excuse. We see here where terrorism in Mali and in Africa is now being used as a population control excuse, with a Chatham House, that is the Royal Institute of International Affairs, speaking in the Foreign Policy Journal, which is the Council on Foreign Relations journal, to sister organizations about Mali's 2.5% problem, going on to describe how in the aftermath of Algerian attacks and insurgency in Mali, expect to hear an overwhelming silence about the population issue. The taboo continues to surround the issue of population control needs to be cast aside. New and highly drastic means of curbing the rate of growth have to be devised in order to put into practice if this dire threat to regional and international stability is ever to be averted. And so they just take anything and they tell us, because there's tension in the Middle East, we need to have greater population control, and that will stop terrorists because they're just fomenting out of the lack of resources in their region. Actually, they already tried to push population control on the Middle East. They didn't accept it, and that not only stirred up the populations, it caused a lot of resentment that was later amplified by the ongoing wars throughout the Middle East and Northern Africa. But furthermore, it was an excuse for the West to implement central banks, to set up their own kingdoms, to implement systems they wanted to control those populations. And it's really related to the overall resistance, while the population control issue is just being pegged on by the elitists when they see any kind of incident going on in Africa. And then Yuri Masson, who wrote this article and has written many fine articles lately, goes on to say they're going to use this excuse for everything. The answer to drunk driving is culling the population. The answer to curing cancer is culling the population, so less people will die as a result of cancer. They've already used it for climate change, saying because of climate change, terrorism will be caused, so we are justified in having the bankers run off tens of thousands of people from their lands and handing it over to corporations. Yes, it's good for the earth. It's good for stopping terrorism. Yes, anything to cull that population. Yeah, they'll use any excuse. I've been through it in detail, so have many other researchers. Now, Alex Jones with Paul Joseph Watson wrote Why the Elite Would Lose a Civil War. It is a part 2. In the part 1, they explain why the elite are seeking a civil war. Basically, it's a tactic of division. It's a tactic of weakening confidence in the American system, scaring away investors, and, of course, setting up the New World Order system, the bankers themselves, as the saviors to basically seize upon civil unrest, broken down economy and everything else, because they're the ones who institute order out of chaos, of course, and outlining how really the system is showing us in so many ways through their amassing of bullets, through the continuity of government plan, through their Homeland Security occupation plan, how they want a war with Americans and how they're preparing for it and really trying to incite it over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. We don't really know if that is the timeline, but of course they factor in comments like those of Al Sharpton recently, who said, Americans, don't try to give me that nonsense about the Second Amendment. Your guns wouldn't do anything to stop drones. You're occupied by the American government already, so just give in and also shut up about that Second Amendment because you're ruled by drones. Well, history does not show that to be the case, and in spite of increasing technological diversionary tactics, of increased domination through the system, using drones, using tactical nukes, using perhaps a biochemical weapon, whatever, we see throughout history, in spite of all that, and in spite of huge standing armies, that resistance itself is its own force. It's difficult to deal with. And even in the case of Iraq, where you had 17,000 troops trying to block the roads, they couldn't quite do it. In Afghanistan, no empire has ever been able to defeat those mountain people, not necessarily the Taliban, those who are actually engaged in some form of terrorism, but the whole of the people who said they don't want to be occupied by any empire and that they know the land and that as long as they resist, basically we've been unable to defeat them, even though their numbers are maybe 25,000 at the most, and we have hundreds of thousands of troops in those countries, and in the general area we have superior weapons. Doesn't really matter as long as there's a true spirit of resistance there. So the question is, if something like that comes to our country, do we still have the spirit of resistance? Because resistance is victory. If they ever did start a civil war, even if you wrote off 90% of the population to being complacent with that system, to going along with it, if 5% of the population, if 10% resisted, that not only literally outnumbers any army forces controlled by the government now, but it's also a people who cannot be conquered through spirit, because you can always find a way to resist. Even if you are disarmed, there's ways to destabilize the enemy. And once you have victories, if they're moral victories, those amplify, those resonate with the people, and the sympathy starts to turn back towards the rightful people, if right is on your side. But where did that even come from? I want to read you this from 1765, because the colonial Americans who later fought a war against the British did have the spirit of independence in many ways. They did have the spirit to resist and to simply say no. And some people actually saw it coming, even on the British side. These are going to be the remarks of Colonel Isaac Barre. Now, he served in the French and Indian War, in the years preceding the American Revolution and the build-up to it. He served alongside those American patriots. He knew them well. He was friends with many in the merchant class, and he defended them in front of Parliament as a member of Parliament, basically a minority, not of one, but of just a couple, almost the only individual speaking out against the Stamp Act passed against the colonies in 1765. And this is really a "you didn't build that" speech. Today we have Obama saying the government's your daddy. We have Chris Rock saying Obama is the country's daddy. He's not only president, but he's also your daddy. He made it happen. We've got Obama giving the speeches saying you didn't build that, small businesses. The government helped you. Somebody helped you with that. Basically saying the government is the provider, and whatever they don't give you, you don't have. That same kind of attitude came from the British in those founding days of America. And again, Colonel Isaac Barre spoke against it. Consider that you didn't build that approach, as he tells you what real Americans were made of. And they weren't always nonviolent. They weren't always sympathetic. They didn't always do the right thing. In fact, many of them didn't agree with each other. And yet they had the spirit of resistance. They sought to moral victories where they could find them, and there eventually was a momentum that built in their favor, leading to the ultimate victories. Now, here again, 1765, opposition to the Stamp Act being imposed on colonial America. They planted by your care? No, your oppressions planted them in America. They fled from your tyranny to a then uncultivated and unhospitable country. And yet, actuated by principles of true English liberty, they met all these hardships with pleasure, Colonel Isaac Barre said, compared with those they suffered with their own country. They nourished up by your indulgence, he asked rhetorically. No, they grew by your neglect of them. And as soon as you began to care about them, that care was exercised in sending persons to rule over them in one department or another, who were perhaps the deputies of some members of this House, sent to spy on their liberty, to misrepresent their actions, to prey upon them, men whose behavior on many occasions caused the blood of those sons of liberty to recoil within them. Then Barre goes on, they, protected by your arms, they have nobly taken up arms in your defense. He's again referring to the French and Indian War, and goes on to explain all the bought and paid for in blood victories of those colonial Americans, and goes on to say, believe me, remember this day I told you so, 1765, that the same spirit of freedom which actuated that people at first will accompany them still. The people, I believe, are as truly loyal as any subjects to the king, but a people who are jealous of their liberties and who will vindicate them if ever they should be violated. But the subject is too delicate, and I will say no more. He predicted so much of what would happen in the American Revolution at the time of the Stamp Act, opposing the Stamp Act, telling the king, telling the parliament, no, these are sons of liberty. These people have the spirit of freedom in them, and your oppression is only going to backfire. It's going to cause resentment in them, and it's going to give them moral victories. What did colonial America do? They said no to the Stamp Act. They intimidated the tax collectors who were meant to impose that act. They burned them in effigy. They sent mobs basically to say, if you collect those taxes, it's your last day in this colony. that first started in Massachusetts. It spread very quickly to Virginia, then to at least 9 of the other colonies, and the Stamp Act was repealed in Britain. They didn't know why, but they eventually caved in because they could see it wasn't going to do them any good, and people like Colonel Barry were right. That spirit of resistance was going to weaken the British position in colonial America. They interviewed Ben Franklin, who was already representing the colony of Pennsylvania, but who had also begun to represent several other colonies because he was such a widespread diplomat. Franklin, by the way, supported imposing the Stamp Act at first till he saw how much the Americans were against it. And they interviewed him, the British government did, overseas after the failure of the Stamp Act, and they asked, were the Americans loyal to the king and to the British system prior to the Stamp Act? Yes, they were, he said, but now they're not. They've turned against the king, and now they're agitated, they're upset. And they went on to ask Benjamin Franklin, if we just lessen the duties of the tax, if we just back off a little, will they comply? Will they submit? No, Benjamin Franklin said, those American colonists will never submit. And that's really the spirit of freedom. As long as some people retain that spirit of freedom, they'll never be beaten by any oppression, maybe temporarily, but in the long run, never beaten by any oppression, no matter how strong the force, as long as people keep that spirit alive. And of course, we don't want to see a civil war. We want to say no to all that. We don't want violence. We want to tell the system ahead of time that it's going to be a failure for them. Because of the spirit of victory. Let's move now to a much lighter subject. Alex and crew visited a Buc-ee's gas station, really some of the biggest gas stations in the entire country. Why? Because they agree to clean their bathrooms, and now they're expanding into a complete empire. Let's go to that piece now, kind of humorous.
All right, we're back from confronting Piers Morgan and taking over his transmission. And Aaron Dykes was telling me this was started by one of Ron Paul's friends in Texas, down by Houston. It's now taking over the whole country. You see them all over the place when I'm on road trips. Buc-ee's all worship the buck-toothed creature. And the reason they say these are taking over all of the truck stops and gas stations is they will clean the bathrooms. I mean, this place is huge. I don't think, Rob, when I pulled up that gave it justice. Maybe you should take this and give them a wide shot of just how big it is, and go visit the legendary toilets.
There's all the way down, and it goes that way just as far.
Oh my God, it's Sha'Carri Jackson right there.
Oh, there he is.
He hangs out at Buc-ee's too.
And there's the giant Mecca. Look, they even got a tent. They have a tent in there. Yeah.
I think the whole point is this is over the top. I mean, do you think it's ever actually? This is in Bastrop, not that big of a town. I mean, there's like, how many ice machines? Like 15? Like 20 of them.
Look, and then they're over here too.
Oh my God, there's more. Now we're on the inside, gentlemen.
Incredible.
And then look. And again, this is only one part of the story. It goes around on each side over there. Okay, that's enough. I really think we're completely out of control. This is going to be, yeah, let's just go see how powerful these are. I've driven by these and never gone in one. They're proliferating everywhere. It's kind of cultic. Hello. I think it's good robots are going to take over humans. The elite don't need us as slaves no more. How you doing there, partner? You've been drinking and driving, boy. You look a little strange. Taking those old movies with the eyes are looking at you through the painting.
Can't hang a man for eating turkey, can you?
Well, I think we can send him to get him over that, boy. How you doing today? Maybe I did the voice for you, huh? Maybe that's a big secret. You got a hankering for a turkey leg? What's wrong with that at Buc-ee's, huh?
Buc-ee's has his own line of things.
Oh, you know. They're patriots now.
Buc-ee's.
Oh, I'm getting one of these. That's it. This is not product placement for Buc-ee's. Oh my God. My wife is going to love this. It's a little snuggle pillow, isn't it?
Alex, do you like Piers Morgan?
Alex, you know you want to turn your guns in. It's for the kids. It's not like a murdering empire's hijacked America that slaughters millions wherever they want. No, they really care about 20 kids. That's right, Alex. Turn them in. They're not going to take anything. Sure, they're taking the pension funds and stuff right now. Sure, the government ships the narcotics in, but they really want the guns because they want to help you. They want to take care of your country. Come on, you like the kids. I'm Buc-ee.
Notice I'm wearing a red cap.
Yeah, Stalin was nice. And Mao's right. Only the government needs the guns. And I like Piers Morgan. Have you heard Bucky do his British accent? Hello, I'm Piers Morgan, and I'm an elitist snob, and I have bodyguards, but you won't be having any firearms.
Alex Young signing
And of
off
course,
for
the rest of that piece is up at YouTube, but just having some fun on the way back from that Piers Morgan event. Got to have some fun along the way, too, even with Alex and crew. We'll turn now to the daily quote. It comes from George H.W. Bush during also former President Gerald Ford's funeral, who was an admitted FBI plant inside the Warren Commission. But George H.W. Bush told the people during that funeral, during the eulogy, the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but the Warren Commission report will always have the final, definitive say on this tragic matter. Why? Because Jerry Ford put his name on it, and Jerry Ford's word was always good. Ladies and gentlemen, never doubt the word of Gerald Ford. We'll be back again tomorrow. Have a good evening. Have a good V-Day. Thanks for watching. Spread the word. Subscribe at PrisonPlanet.tv. Spread the word through PlanetInfowars.com, and never stop fighting that info war. It's not too late to turn things back around to the spirit of America of 1776, of 1765. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Infowars.com is proud to introduce the new Infowars skateboards by Alien Workshop. Skaters have always been against the grain socially. Now wake up your friends politically. Just go to InfowarsStore.com. We have divide and conquer or brainwashing. Then take your deck to your local skate shop, pick out your own trucks, your own wheels, and then hit the streets and wake some people up. Here is legendary skateboarder Jake Nunn.
This one has a lot more concave than I have on my board, and I like concave. It makes it easier to turn and feel the board. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's almost the same shape as mine. It's not really a sport, and it's not really art. It's just kind of freedom, you know? I've listened to Alex Jones for a long time, and I love what Infowars does. I've always loved Alien Workshop, too. Like, I think it's kind of cool you guys got together. This one's pretty nice. Definitely one for the wall, one for the collection. Also good to skate.
Get these limited edition decks at InfowarsStore.com.
This is Jake Nunn. Get these beautiful new skateboards at Infowars.com. Alien Workshop collaboration. Good stuff.
ProPure is introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. This is the Pro One by ProPure. You wanted it, you got it. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium fluoride. You have a system that cuts out the sodium fluoride and up to 95% of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Advanced manufacturing technology combines silver-impregnated white ceramic with new Aquamedics advanced media for removal of fluoride and other heavy metals, all in one filter element. It cuts out the acid derivative of fluoride. It is the only one that does it, and out of the gates, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the only system that in one unit helps reduce or remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, ammonia, and chlorine, hydrofluorosilicic acid, the most common form of fluoride not covered by other fluoride filter brands, and sodium hexafluorosilicate. This is a revolution against the tyrants. They love putting the toxic acid base of fluoride into your water. They love the fact that it's an adjuvant supercharging the trace Prozac in the water and the hormones and the other chemicals. By cutting out fluoride, you cut out the turbocharger in all the poison being artificially introduced into your body. This is what I use. It's a win-win. You get a high-quality product at the lowest price. You support the InfoWar. Get your ProPure with the new Pro One filter today at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. Tonight is Thursday, February 14th, 2013, V-Day. And I'm your host, Aaron Dykes. Now, tonight in the news, we have, of course, the aftermath of the Christopher Dorner episode. It ended in spectacular abandon for due process, spectacular incitement of divisions in our society, with many people cheering on the factions warring against the LAPD, while others cheering on the extrajudicial killing of Christopher Dorner. Of course, Breitbart and Drudge Report exposed how many of the CNN panel ludicrous claims that the cabin fire was not intentionally set. Paul Joseph Watson writes about the denial on behalf of the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office, specifically stating that it was not set on purpose, saying we didn't intentionally burn that cabin to get Mr. Dorner out, and they just went on to deny it and defer questions from the press and duck other questions about whether they offered him a chance to surrender or what name you, despite the fact that audio was broadcast live on many of these local stations, exist in the police recordings, talking about burn that MFer down, talking about the CS gas they were throwing in there, talking about how the burners are deployed. We have the fire ready. Now, we have clips summing up some of this audio and, of course, the ridiculous denial. Can we go to that? Do we have that ready, guys?
We do believe this gun battle is going on with Christopher Dorner. He is armed and extremely dangerous.
How sure are they that this is Dorner?
Well, we're not positive, and until we get this guy in custody, until he's in handcuffs and in a jail, we're not going to know for sure.
We believe suspect Dorner began firing and ambushed our
host, cheered it and celebrated, said it was exciting like a Denzel Washington movie, and compared Dorner to Django Unchained going on a killing spree. Meanwhile, Melissa Melton wrote yesterday about the 3 wallets with ID cards that were reportedly recovered, all belonging to Christopher Dorner, which raised their own questions. One of them was allegedly found, of course, at the Big Bear cabin, apparently not scorched by the fires set by police and sheriffs there. Yet 2 other IDs were found in southern parts of California, one by a stadium in San Diego and another at the border crossing point. And so which wallet is the real one? Are any of them real? Do the media have any grasp on the facts? And do these raise further questions the way the passports allegedly recovered from the 9/11 hijackers do about the veracity of 9/11? And of course, you got the police wantonly firing upon innocent civilians, endangering their lives, recklessly pursuing this one man they couldn't catch for days, nearly a week. But of course, the biggest questions of all over Christopher Dorner are raised over the...
We used the next tier gas was that was pyrotechnic, does generate a lot of heat. We introduced those canisters into the residence.
There was some chatter that was caught, I guess, on scanners and everything about a burner, and I don't know what that is. Can you explain what a burner is?
The pyrotechnic type canisters are commonly referred to as burners.
7 burners deployed and we have a fire.
Copy, 7 burners deployed and we have a fire.
Get going right now.
And so there you have it, the government, aspects of the government, and again engaged in a Waco-style burning down of a suspect, demonizing him in the press, burning and killing him. We'll never know if he was really guilty of all these crimes because, of course, there won't be a real investigation. It's just this public trial. But then the denial, oh, that was semantics. Burner, that didn't mean fire. Saying burn it down, that didn't mean burn it down. Fire, that just means they were excited. Gas, that's some kind of antiquated 60s term. It's a gas, baby. That was just the way SWAT...
Deputy sheriffs that were responding. 2 of our deputy sheriffs were struck by gunfire. Certainly it could be anywhere at this point, and that's why we're searching door to door.
We spoke to individuals in that neighborhood who said that no one ever knocked on that door, on their doors, people who live there.
As I said, there was an extensive search in that area.
Burn the gas, burn the gas, burn the gas. Hey, hold it, get out. Get the F out. Is anyone founded if they think that this was an intentional burning alive of the suspect?
I don't know, really how to respond to the recording.
They have not been able to determine who started the fire inside the cabin, whether it was the suspect, presumably Dorner, or if it was perhaps one of the things that the SWAT team out there had planned in advance of this.
I can tell you that it was not on purpose. We did not intentionally burn down that cabin.
10-4, we're just bringing fire in about 200 yards out. Your call. Charlie, you ready for fire?